Hello and welcome to this section. Through the study of the previous sections, we have mastered the addition, deletion, modification, and query of the database. In this lesson, we will consolidate the content we have learned before through a practical case. First, let's take a look at a content we want to complete in this class. This is an online address book system. We can enter a content here, and then enter a phone. If we enter the phone number here at will, when we click Add, it will tell us to enter a valid content, and then we can enter a real one here phone number, format, and then click Add. It will tell us that it has been added successfully. Similarly, if we refresh the content, we can also see a content of Bank of Jejong we just added on the last page. Then when we click the Edit button, a pop-up box will appear. We can click Menching to update it close. Let's click Edit again to modify its content. Then click and modify, the actual content will be modified, and when we refresh, we can see that the content is a real modification. Then when we output, we also need to carry out a paging output. If we want to delete, we can click Delete, and then the content of this line can be deleted. Then we can switch again, and we can find that the content just deleted has disappeared. It is such a very simple function of an address book, and then this feature I also hope you can make a production through your own practice, and then we will learn the content of this lesson in the future. Let's open our editor. First of all, change the name of the application to our address book. Click a Create button. First of all, we will finish the production of the most basic UI. Here, we will give the UI, and then build a simple UI for it. First of all, we can confirm that there is only one page for such a content. So we first select Frontend to add a page, and then change the name of this page to be our address book page. Then, when we select the address book, there is an address book with 3 words at the top, so we add a text here, and then the following is a text. The content of the line contains 2 input boxes and a button, so we go to Add a Line widget, and then add input box, and a button respectively in the line widget, and here we turn off the automatic line wrapping of the line, and then clear its background color first. Then, we reduce the size of the input box. First, select the first input box and adjust it to a 100, then select the second input box and adjust it to a 120, and then select such a button. We adjust it to an 80, then adjust its height to a 40, and then change its font size slightly, turn it down a little, for example, number 15, and then change the text of the button, which is called an ad. Its background color is not good looking. You can deepen it. If the corner of the border he uses doesn't look good, you can change the rounded corner of the border a little. Then, in order to look better as a whole, we can set one of its screenwriters to it. For example, if it is horizontally aligned, we can set it to an equal spacing, and then set a little inner margin on the left and right, for example, 18 on the left inner margin. The right inner margin also gives it an 18, so we can finish this line with a simple input, and then change its height to a package. Okay, here is an entry line. Let's double-click to change the name to entry line, and then the following is the content of the address book we want to display. Since the following is to display the contents of the address book, then we will change the following series into a scrollable area, so here, we add another column, and then whether this is a content of one row in the column, so we add another row in the column, which is actually a card of one of our address books, so this can be done here. First locate our card, and then it is an input box containing a name, then a mobile phone number, and a button for editing and deleting. Here we can also complete a production in turn. First, add a text, which is our name. We can change a name here to call our name. Similarly, we set its width. For the width here, we give it a width of about 100, and then change its font size a little smaller, font 15, and then we can change the color a little lighter. Click Finish. Then, in addition to the name, the next one is his phone number. Let's paste it again. Here is a phone. We can take a look at 135111. The length can be displayed normally. We can make it a little more. For example, there is a width of 120, and then there are 2 such buttons. We can copy one copy of this button first, and then paste 2 copies here. This button must be too large. Let's also change a width of the button, such as a 40. Yes, the first one is one of our editors. Let's take the same color here. It's called such a green. The one below it is deleted, and then we can take the deleted color casually. It's such a red. Then we also design the margin of the power supply here. Its left inner margin, or give it an 18, and right margin we also give it an 18, and then we give him a little space between the name and the name. For example, we give him a 12 for the left outer margin here, and then we give him a left outer margin for 6 for the tone. Similarly, we also give him a left love screenwriter for 6, and then change the width of such a column to an open effect. OK, then we can delete the extra card here, leave this card for us to copy and paste, and then empty it by playing a background color of a column here. A background color of a card on the side of the box is also cleared. Let us touch the next part. The next part is actually a paging container. Here we directly select the address book, and then in the expansion widget, we can directly add a paging widget in the page navigation. Here, because it should be centered, including the address book above us, we select the page and change its horizontal alignment to a centered alignment, and then change the address book, which is our address book. Similarly, it has a little screenwriter up and down. Here we give it a little screenwriter, so we can make a general plan done. Next, there is an effect of clicking a button to enter. Here we will slightly change one of the edit boxes after the URL is made. The edit box is actually our pop-up window. Then we directly add a banner here. Here we directly use the relative positioning banner, change it into an overall layout and a center, and then open one of its back scenes, and then set the color slightly. Here it's about 60, and then one of its background colors should be completely white. We set it to a white, and then there are 2 input boxes, and a button to add 2 input boxes, and a button. You can see that these 2 input boxes are 200 by default. We can make it a little smaller. For example, we can change the default width of the 2 to 150, and then we can change the height of the button here to 40. Its background color is a little darker, and the font size of the text is also a little smaller. Then the text button here is called OK, and then change the overall layout of the column, and center it, and one on this side is centered, and then the 3 widget on this side set up a little bit of a screenwriter for it. OK, then the first one should be called ours. Please enter your name, so let's change the prompt here. Here is please enter your name, and then below is a please enter phone. Then you can change its input type to an integer or mobile phone keyboard. Then a banner here is displayed with a name called an editor. Let him hide it first, hide it. Similarly, we also change the content here. It is also called asking for instructions for a life, and then it is called please enter a phone. Then the input type here can also be changed to an integer, so that a UI of our main body can be made. After the UI is made, what are we going to do next? Do we generally finish it first a design of a backend service, so here we go to make up for a backend service. First of all, we select backend to design a database for him. If backend is selected, we click a private database here, and then double-click to change the name. Here is our address list. Then we can see what data it stores in the address list, at least one name and one phone, right? So let's add a field here, first a name, and then the same phone is also a string field, so let's say a phone here. Is it over? Do you remember that we said before that when we delete and output data, how do we judge whether a data is actually deleted or retained now? Will a status field be added? So here we add a field in the field called our status, and here it can be defined that if it is equal to 1, it proves that the data is still available, and then equal to 0, it means that the data is useless to us, that is, we have deleted it, and then it is equivalent to that we have completed the creation of a database. Then here we design a series of backend services. The first one is our add address book. So here we add a service, that is, our add address book will be added. What data does he need to get from frontend? Does he need to get a name and a phone number? So here I receive the parameters we add to, the first is our life, and then the second is our phone. Then the same return parameters are very classic. The three return parameters are whether one of us is successful, a reason for our failure, and a result of submission. Okay, when the service starts here, we call a database on our side, and then perform a submission operation on it. His name corresponds to the name and telephone submitted by us. His state is basically equal to 1 by default, which is an available state. Then we perform a submission here, a callback, and then when his service is successful, it is equal to whether the one submitting the result is successful. Its failure reason is a failure reason for us to submit results. Then, a submission result here is an object variable of our submission result, so we have completed a definition of a submission service. Here we can test it. For example, a big black here, and then call 1355, and then click debugging. You can see that such a piece of data has completed a submission. We can also see a record of such a piece of data in the database, so that we can complete the addition of records. Similarly, if we have completed a submission, what instructions should we ask? One is a data information. What else is it? Whether our service is successful or not is one of the reasons for its failure. Don't forget anything else. If we design paging, do we want to return the total number of entries to the past? So let's have another total number of entries here. In this way, have we completed a definition of service receiving parameters and return parameters, and then we can start to enter the database here line operation. Since we need to return to the general debugging, what should we do to the database first? Is it a statistical operation? So let's choose a statistical number here. Do you want to fill in the screening criteria? To fill in, why? Because for us, only if the state is equal to 1, it is valid data for us. If the angular state is not equal to 1, it is not valid data for us, right? So here we click a callback. When it completes this operation, we temporarily store it through a numerical variable. Here is our data volume. Then, we assign a value to the data volume, and the content of the assignment is a result of its statistics. Then we do the next operation, that is, we perform an output operation on our address book. What are the filter conditions? Is it still necessary to satisfy that our state is equal to 1, so a state here is equal to 1, and then we don't need to define a sorting method here, but what is the function we want to define? Is it a formula like we used to talk about? Is the number of entries per page multiplied by what? Multiplied by a product of the number of current page numbers in brackets minus 1, and then add a 1, and then it's simpler. What? It is our number of entries per page multiplied by our current page number. Does this complete an operation of our division of business? Then, there is no need to update the time here, no need to submit the time, no need to create users and statuses, and we only need our data ID, name and phone, so we can output through this mode, and then although we don't have a search condition here, but we still make it according to the conditional mode. When it is successful and there are data, what does it mean? It shows that the current service can indeed get some data, so the data information here is equal to a value of an object array of our output results. Whether it succeeds or not is that it has no reason for failure, and then its total number is equal to a value of our data volume. Then, similarly, we make another callback. If it is successful, what does empty data mean? Explain whether there is no data, so whether the success here is equal to a no, and then the failure reason is that there are no corresponding conditions. What is the total number of entries? Are you just 0? Similarly, we can call back again here. If it has indeed failed, whether the current service here is successful or equal to no, the reason for the failure is whether it is a server exception, and its total number must also be 0. In this way, we can complete our definition of data display, that is, our data output service. Then, in the same way, we define a service. What here is our data modification. When we perform the modification, what kind of receiving parameters do we need to define? Is the first point that our data ID is necessary? What else do we have to do in addition to the data ID? In such an environment, he may modify his name or his phone. Here, we need to receive his name and his phone. Similarly, if he modifies, we also need to judge whether an update result is successful and why it fails. This time, we still choose our address book to perform an operation of updating one message and outputting it. This is different from what we learned before, because we can update it in many ways. Here, we can directly update one message and output it. Similarly, a data ID here is equal to a data ID submitted by us. Copying a name here is equal to selecting the wrong name here. The following name is equal to a name submitted by us. Why do I react so sensitively that we chose the wrong name? This is because the shadow here should be gray, not blue. The blue shadow proves that it is a received parameter. Therefore, the same phone call here is still equal to the one submitted here. After we complete such an update, we can output the updated record. Then, we will output one of his data ID name and one of his phones. After that, we will also perform a subcondition. If he succeeds and has data, in other words, he successfully updates a piece of data, what should he do? Update a return result for the current service area. The update result here is its update result. Such a value of the object array is such a piece of data. Then, whether the same side is successful or not is the same. If it is successful, but the empty data is successful, what does the empty data mean? It is a service that has indeed been executed, but no data has been updated, so for us, is it successful? Why did it fail? There is no corresponding condition, that is, he can't find such a data ID at all, so it's possible that this data has been deleted. Then, the last condition is our failure, and then the current service area sets its return result. Whether it is successful or not is our failure reason for not letting it, and our failure reason for updating the result. What's the difference between data deletion and here? We don't need to get a name and a phone number. Therefore, a parameter x on both sides and a content here are also x. Then, the name is not modified here, but what is our status is modified. If he wants to copy, he directly copies it equal to 0, which is equivalent to changing the status of such a piece of data. Changing the status from 1 to a 0 is equivalent to deleting its data. Is a series of services like ours well defined? First, let's verify one of our add operations. Let's change it here. It's called a big white, and then change it here. 44 to click a debugging, you can also see that it has been successfully submitted. Let's take a look at the data, so that the two pieces of data have been submitted. Then let's take a look at a function of data display. Here we count 5 items per page. Then the current page number is equal to 1. We carry out a debugging. We can see that he has output the two pieces of data, and then our data is modified. We update the big black with data ID equal to 1 into what? Update it to our big white, and then write it casually on the phone. Then we perform a debugging here to see whether it is a successful trial and update it. In addition, the updated data is that its data ID equals 1, and its corresponding condition have also been output. We can see that the first data has also become a big white. Then, let's delete the data. Only the data ID can be written for deletion. Here our data ID is equal to 1. We need to debug. You can see what he told us, we have deleted such a piece of data. Let's see that the value with a status equal to 0 in the address book is gone. Then, let's look at the data display again. When we are debugging, we can see that there is only one piece of data such as white, and then the first piece of white just now will not be displayed again, so we don't know it is to complete a series of operations of real deletion, modification, and query of the whole backend, and then we come to the front end, and we go to make up for this series of logic. First, let's write the logic of adding buttons. What about it? What do you do when it's clicked? It is a data submission, but here we need to check a data first, so let's add a condition here, and what, and the content type of his name is empty, the type is empty, or what? In other words, please enter the content in the phone. You can see it with a non-mobile phone. Therefore, we conducted a test here, that is, what does it mean if the type is empty, or a non-mobile phone? Explain whether one of its contents is invalid. So here we add a system interface to display a prompt called please enter valid content. Then we add a condition below, that is, the rest. In other words, if it input a name and a phone number correctly, it will enter into the rest of us. What do we do in the rest? Is it to perform an operation of adding a record? So here we add an action of us to perform an operation to add a row of our data. His name is equal to a content of his name, and his phone is equal to a content of our phone. Then, when it is finished, let's make a judgment on the condition, and what does it mean if one of its returned results is successful? Did he really complete a submission? When he actually completes the submission, first let's ask the system interface to display the prompt. Here we copy and paste a copy called successful submission, and then fill in a series of logic. For example, let's clear one of our input boxes, copy here, and then let one of our telephone input boxes also clear, do it, and then what do you want to do next? In addition to clearing the content, should we add a row of data to the row of data we originally displayed? So here, we add the two variables we need. What variables? One is our object array, and the other is the number of data pieces. So here is our address book, and then here is a number of data entries. So what should he do when he clicks an add? What should he do to make our address book execute? To add a row of data, we can directly select a user-defined structure. Why? Because here, we can get such a submission result from the returned result, which is a settlement string defined by us. It can directly help us add it, and then we will add it to a position at the end of A. Then, after a data addition is completed, we should also add the total number of data 1 plus 1 operation. Of course, if there is no successful submission here, what should we do? Do we want to prompt others, so do we add an action under other conditions, that is, a system interface to display a prompt? What is it called? It's called a failure reason for our returned results. Tell him why you failed to submit. In this way, we can do a good job of adding data. Of course, before we finish the test, we can do some simple data binding. For example, we add a circular creation container to the card here, throw the card in for a circular creation, and then we can import a structure into an address book here in the address book table. We need to delete irrelevant fields, and then we perform a simple data binding here. The data source here is a value of the address book here, the card next to here, and a name here is equal to a name of our current data. Then we will do the data display related content. Because we want to do the data display, we also found that no matter whether we are doing a page switch or search, or when the page is displayed, we need to call such a data display content, so here we usually use the action group to do it. Here we will make a call to our data display, and then what content does the data display need to submit? Does it need at least one current page number? Okay, let's define such a data display. What did he do when he started? Did he call a data display service on our side? We have defined the number of US business entries here, which is a value of our US business data volume. Whether the current page number is received from here, so select a current page number in the drop-down menu, and then what to do when it is completed. Is this a branch to add a condition, and whether its return result is successful or not? What does one mean? It indicates that it has indeed completed an output of a data. At this time, we can assign a value to the total number of data, that is, the number of data on our side. What is the assignment? It is the total number of returned results. Similarly, we can also assign a value to our address book. The content of the assignment is a data information on the side of the returned results. Of course, a condition is added here, that is, under other conditions, it indicates whether it has failed. Therefore, we will display a prompt on the system interface. The content of the prompt is a failure reason for returning the result. Is such a data display completed? Then we call it when our page is displayed. What is it doing when it is displayed? Call our data display. The current page number has just been displayed. It must be when the page number is equal to 1, right? Similarly, when we click the paging button, do we also call it? When it is changed, why choose our data to show whether the page number is equal to a page widget where we put the current page number? We make a binding. What is the total number of data? It is a value of the number of data items here, and then we bind the data amount of each page here to a value of the data amount of each page here, so that we can complete a simple display function. and then we can preview the effect here. Here we can open our check to see whether there is a big white by default. Then, let's add a series of data here. For example, let's call Xiaohei, and then click Add. You can see that a piece of data here has been added, and then we can refresh it again to see that the data here also comes out, and then we add a little more, add again, and we can come out again. Similarly, we add a little more, so that we can carry out a test later. President Tang, let's add another one. Students, let's add another one. You can see that paging is triggered here for no reason. Why? Because we can only have 5 pieces of data per page. When we switch to the next page, we will only see one content of the next page, and then when we switch to the previous page, there will only be 5. You can think about how to cut off such a large piece of data. For example, when it is added to 5 pieces, we will no longer show it here. Yes, it's actually very simple. What is it? Can we add a condition when we click an Add button and add a row of data here? What condition? I'll help you directly here. In fact, it's also very easy to understand. When to add a function in the current address book. Should it be less than the amount of data in each page? In this way, when it is less than such a piece of data, we will add another one. Otherwise, we will not add such a condition. Is it right when we click Add only one page will be triggered here, and then when it meets such a condition, there will be no additional display here? Equivalent to here, we have completed a display of the data, as well as our normal one to add a function. However, I won't write it here. Then we can do it ourselves, and then we can take our data modification here. What its data it is a value of a data ID on our side, and his name is a content of this name. Another phone call is a part of this phone book. A condition is added after we meet here, and what here is whether we return the result successfully. What does it mean? That means it actually completed an update, right? So here we go to our address book to perform an operation of setting a line of data, and then what is the line number here, and whether the line number is a piece of paper of the current serial number here, and then set whether the object is an update result of the returned result, but the returned update result is an array. We need to get it in the array the paper of an object, so we can get an object like him by adding a 0. Then we go through our event to make one of our edit boxes hidden. Similarly, if this side fails, what are the other conditions? Is it possible to give a prompt through one of our system interfaces? The prompt displayed here is a failure reason for our returned results. In this way, whether an operation of one of our updates is finished? Come here, let's verify it. Let's preview it. For example, the update of the white here turns into a white one, and then click OK. You can see the white here has been updated. Let's refresh it. We can see whether the updated white also appears here. Therefore, our update has been completed, and then our deletion. In fact, deletion is relatively easier. Why? Because what do we do when we go to trigger some sauce and wine? Shall we directly call us to delete the data? Its data ID is equal to the data ID of the current data here. Because the delete button itself is under our circular creation, it can directly get our data ID without a transfer. In the same way, we can judge by our judgment. For example, whether one of its returned results is successful is equivalent to that. In other words, the data has been deleted. What should we do? Is it possible to delete a data corresponding to our front end? So the address book here chooses to delete a row of data, and then what is the row number here? Is it a current serial number? Then add a condition on the same side. What do you do under other conditions? Under other conditions, we will prompt with a pop-up box. A prompt is displayed here, which is a failure reason for its return result. Is it possible to complete a production of our entire application just like this? Then of course, there are many places for this application to be optimized, which can give you a little hint. For example, when I click delete here, the value here does disappear, but can I have a way to fill in a value here, just like if I don't delete so much after deleting here, because I can't see it after deleting all? Well, originally he had pagination. Can you move the content of the second page to this page for display? This is also possible. So what kind of effect should we finish in the end? We can make up for it in this application. That's all the content of this section. Thank you for watching.